Once upon a time, business as usual was often good enough. No more. Where we are going, good enough is dead. In a world where everything is connected, where everything is equally excellent, where performance is reaching perfection, there's only one space left to innovate in: you. Right now, you are a central point in the raging tornado of change fueled by digitization, mobilization, augmentation, disintermediation, automation. Well, the list goes on. Science fiction is becoming science fact. Think about self-driving cars or computers that can learn and think. The way we work will never be the same. The skills we need will be dramatically different. Winning or losing are now happening faster than ever before. So what's your response? How will you discover new opportunities in one of the most transformational times in human history? Are you driving change, or are you being driven by it? Disruption has become the new normal. With change, it's always gradually, then suddenly, well, things really have stopped happening gradually. This change is exponential. Everything that used to be dumb and disconnected is now wired and intelligent. Cars, cities, ports, farms, even our bodies will be wired with sensors and will talk to each other. These game changers are also combinatorial. They amplify each other, creating a perfect storm of change. Quantum computing fuels big data. The Internet of Things fuels artificial intelligence and deep learning, which fuels robotics. However, anything that cannot be digitized or automated will become extremely valuable. Human-only traits such as creativity, imagination, intuition, emotion, and ethics will be even more important in the future, because machines are very good at simulating, but not at being. Yes, robots and software will do some of our work, but this will allow us to focus on things that cannot be automated. To imagine change squared, you've got to start engaging more with what might be, not just with what is. Immerse yourself in the immediate future, 5 to 7 years out from today. We need to go beyond technology and data to reach human insights and wisdom. Technology represents the how of change, but humans represent the why. The future is about holistic business model. The opportunity is to be liquid, to learn just in time, not just in case, not single improvements, but complete transformations, not individual systems, but new ecosystems. Humanity is where true and lasting value is created. We will engage, relate, and buy things because of the experiences they provide, because of their transformative power. The future doesn't just happen. The future gets happened. The new way to work is to embrace technology, but not to become it. The future is in technology, yet the bigger future lies in transcending it. Let's live and lead from here.
Powerful video, huh? Yeah, it's talking about the future and how the human experience is becoming more and more and more valuable because technology is going to be taking care of a lot of the routine things, right? It's all going to be automated. So just something to think about and plant the seed for today. We've been talking a lot about the future and about how the world is changing. But I wanted to bring it to a human level, back to a human level, and really set up Peter, because that is, he's a huge champion of community and engaging people to be accountable in their communities and really make a difference in the world. So I'm privileged and honored to welcome Peter Block. So he's zooming in here from Cleveland, Ohio. He's an author, consultant, and citizen of Cincinnati, Ohio. His work is about empowerment, stewardship, chosen accountability, and the reconciliation of community. He's written several best-selling books including flawless consulting, a guide for getting your expertise used, stewardship, choosing service over self-interest, and awakening the power of families and neighborhoods. So he's really about creating workplaces and communities that work for all. Please welcome Peter Block.
So I'm sorry I'm not with you, but I'm happy to be here. I want to share some thoughts with you. I'm an excuse for you to have a conversation with each other. The idea of living in a disruptive world. I was working for Exxon in 1971, and it was an energy crisis and a fuel crisis, an oil crisis. You might remember, but you probably don't because you're younger than I am. And for the first time in their history, Exxon had to lay people off. And after that, every executive gave a speech every year that says this is a time of change. This is a time of disruption. The future will not be like the present. So that was 45 years ago. And so it tells me that there's no more disruption or change now than there has been for a very long time. And in fact, modernism is all about change. It has a blind eye towards tradition. You, as an Indonesian culture, have an amazing culture. I've just discovered that you're very fast growing, 5.5% growth in 2017, at least recently. And I congratulate you on that. Inflation, 3.4%. So as long as you stay ahead of inflation, I congratulate you on that. And I also discovered that you like to shop. So maybe during the break you can go shopping because our world is organized around consumption. It's organized around the belief that no matter how much I have, it's not enough. I also discovered that you're a country of 17,000 islands. And that's quite an act of aggregation that you've done. So congratulations on that. What I want to talk about is a way of thinking about change, thinking about leadership, thinking about transformation that kind of goes against the traditional thoughts. Most of our cultures, most of our notion about change and leadership is that it can be managed. And so we have a huge industry called managing change, which declares that the future can be predictable if I can just be smart enough and orderly enough and engineer the future. And we have cultures, especially as you become, as the Western culture, through globalization, has kind of spread its wings, its arms, its clutches, however you want to say it. And so we believe that consistency, control, and predictability are good management. And I think they are. I think to manage an organization is to make it predictable, take uncertainty out of the future. In the face of that, you all are here to discover leadership. I got involved in organization development in 1963, so it's over 50 years ago. And the instinct of this movement is no different today than it was 50 some years ago, which is to humanize a workplace in the face of the fact that consistency, control, and predictability are what it values most. And so the challenge of leadership is to imagine an alternative future. The task of management is to create order and predictability in the world. And so we all live with both of those demands. And anything I say about leadership, about engagement, about humanizing the workplace is not to devalue the need for order and structure. Nobody says we shouldn't have management. It's just that management is incapable of creating an alternative future. the management mindset, which says that tell me where we're headed, make the future certain, measure every step, engineer it, create a blueprint for the future. That's impossible. I can create a blueprint for what is now, but I can't create a blueprint for what is tomorrow. And I think this is what this profession stands for, is to say, is it possible that we can come together in an unpredictable world and through imagination and vision and a different context, we can be ready for a different future. And now what I want to do in this first part is talk about the power of context. Context is the terrain. If you go in the woods, you see a tree, but the context is the forest. The context is the environment. And the context has a certain set of beliefs. Most of the existing context is organized around the idea of scarcity, which says that we don't have enough. The consumer culture says that whatever I have is not enough. The current context is one of individualism, as if every one of your 17,000 islands had a mind of its own. I don't know about Indonesian schools, but in the Western schools, as soon as you go into the first grade, you are taught to compete against your classmates. Before the first grade, you were taught to play. You were taught to learn. And so it's somehow in the first grade, we turn people from learners to performers. And in the act of having us compete against each other, we steal our humanity. And I think the East, the Buddhist, the Muslim tradition has the capacity to restore our humanity in a way that the West can't imagine. And if you need evidence of the West's struggle with its humanity, read the news. And so we're in a strange era where we've elected a businessman. And so I think the shift of attention is going to go to the East, depending on you, to say, how do we lead, even manage in a way that restores our humanity? And it turns out that the more human an organization is, the higher performance it is. Somebody talking back to me? Maybe that was Simon.
Keep going, Peter, please. Thank you.
Okay. Simon says, pay attention. Take a nap. Simon says, thank you for being here. And so the context of individualism, the context of competition, the context of scarcity, the context of certainty makes an alternative future difficult. It puts people in competition with each other. It does annual performance reviews. I don't know if you've adopted that yet. So all of these things is what we come together in the organization development world, is to imagine an alternative, is to imagine a context of enough, that what I am is enough. What I have is enough. Who we are together is enough. And that's a radical idea. Most of us have spent our lives working on our deficiencies. If you have performance appraisals, how many raise your hand if you do performance appraisals every year? Oh, how nice. I don't see many hands raised. Then I'll skip that part of my presentation. So the alternative context is one of partnering. The traditional context is one of parent-child. Most of the leadership literature and training that comes from the West is to teach managers and leaders and executives to be good parents. You hear people say, I am a Leader, I grow people, as if the people that work for me are plants in my garden. The alternative to that, the alternative context of collaboration, cooperation. And you know, in the West, in America, we're terrified of words that start with CO, because we think they all end with communism, socialism. But you have the opportunity, the fact that you're coming to an organization development network means that cooperation, collaboration. So we come here to be partners instead of parents. That the relationships between peers is what produces high performance. And your traditional cultures understood that. They were organized as circles. Most traditional cultures were organized as circles. Modern cultures are organized as pyramids, as if the leader is the point, as if the CEO is the parent, the CEO is the answer. It's nice to see you're in a room with tables, at least, that are circles. So what I want to do with this time together is to kind of talk about, if I took seriously an alternative context of engagement, of cooperation, of interdependence, of partnership, of belief that power is distributed, that people at the bottom of the organization decide how successful we will become. If we took that seriously and had a context of distributing choice rather than centralizing choice, radical as that might be, then what would that look like? Which is the intent of kind of, that's been my idea of the purpose of organization development. It also confronts the question of what's the point of an organization? Is it to make profit, or is it to serve society? And I think there's a movement in the world to question the profit idea. That is profit the point, or is profit the fuel? And this profession, you're coming to this gathering, says, well, maybe we have a larger purpose than making money. Now, you'll never read that in the business pages. You'll never read that in the business schools. But the idea is, if you want to motivate people, if you want to prepare for the future, if you want to live in an unpredictable world, then you need a larger purpose than efficiency. You need a larger purpose than scale. You need a larger purpose than cost. You need a larger purpose than speed. And these are the gods of modernism. They're the gods of Western economies. And to me, that I know that you have the opportunity to not take them as gods, just take them as something useful, but to have a larger purpose. Because when you choose speed, how fast can we go? When I choose convenience as the reason that whatever my smartphone is, it's not smart enough. And Apple now is Apple X, which they want to call Apple 10. I don't know if they market it yet in Indonesia, but they're marketing it now. And so the idea that we're here for speed, we're here for convenience, we're here for scale. Speed is a defense against depth. Scale is an obstacle to meaning and purpose. Efficiency also is the reason that democracy fails. It's the reason that engagement fails. It's the reason that empowerment. We don't have time, it's inefficient. So really this function of organization development is to say, is there a way to create a high-performing world that's based on depth, that's based on relationship, that's based on purpose and meaning, that's based on high engagement, and that has leadership as a convening function. Leadership as the act of bringing people together and engage them with each other in a way that creates a widely distributed sense of commitment, purpose, motivation. Dominant cultures think people are motivated by money. There's no evidence to support that. Compensation systems really need to be transparent and equitable. And so I think the purpose of AODN, organization development, is to give voice to an alternative context, an alternative belief system, in which most evidence supports it. We know that high team performance leads to high organizational performance. And so really, I want to talk about a culture, how to create a culture of engagement. And I like being here with you, even though I'm not, because this experience of these 3 days has been around high engagement. I like the fact that you have prayer in the middle of the day. You may say that's because we're a Muslim country. Well, prayer values silence. Prayer values reflection. Prayer is a time for Sabbath, for a break from the productivity and tyranny of production. And I wish that all of our meetings had prayer, whether it's to God or whoever you worship. And so I think this meeting is a good example of the things I'm talking about. To create a context of engagement, you have to believe that the question is more important than the answer. And so a lot of our time together is organized around the idea of, well, what question engages us? Questions matter. Questions bring us together. Answers push us apart. What's frightening in the world is not people's belief system. It's not the clash of religions or cultures or politics. It's the dominance of certainty. It's the fundamentalism. It's to believe that my point of view is fact. And part of the context of interdependence or empowerment is to believe that most of our way of thinking isn't fact. It's just something we've created. Most of my story about myself is something I made up. I love the idea that in Russia, sorry if there's Russians in the audience, but in Russia, even the past is unpredictable. And if you believe that, which I do, then it says that my story about history, my story about how I got here, is something I have constructed to make meaning out of the events of my life, but I constructed it. And part of maturity and part of the task of leadership is to engage people in saying what alternative narrative, what alternative story can we construct now that will better serve us than the one that brought us here. And to me, that's the challenge. That's what we're trying to create together. And the second half of this, you'll have to tell me when I'm done with this presentation. But I want to talk about what's the methodology. And to me, leadership is to engage people in creating an alternative narrative or story about what we as an organization now came here to create. It doesn't mean I'm ignorant of the past. I need memory to have affection about a place. All of your organizations have a history and a beginning, and it has to be honored and it has to be respected, but it doesn't have to be decisive. And part of the engagement or organization development or creating an alternative future is about an emergent world, an emergent design versus an engineered design. And the methodology, the leadership function, is to convene people, not to be a role model, not to carry and provide a vision, not to be a charismatic person. And I have a particular stake in this belief because I've tried to be charismatic, and this is what we have. This is what I'm stuck with. People say, Peter, when are you going to get dynamic? And I say, this is as dynamic as I get. This is me at my most. And so the role model notion of leadership, the visionary notion of leadership, we have to let go of that, because all that does is reinforce the parent-child relationship. Now you may say, but that's deep in our culture, it's deep in our history. Well, it's an aspect of our culture, it's an aspect of our history. But we also have a history of the circle. We also have a history of collaboration. We also came together as a nation. And you've elected a president who has kind of a people orientation. And that means something. And so that's the kind of, so what I'm talking about is leadership as a convening function. The way to deal with the disruptive nature of the world and empowerment is to say, how do we convene people? In the second half, I want to get very specific about what engagement, what convening, what helping people get connected. The basic belief system of this association is that relationships are primary. And that without connectedness, without relationship, performance becomes more difficult. High control, autocratic, predictable, certain organizations only work if they're a monopoly. If you have no competition, then patriarchy is just fine. Efficiency is just fine. Speed is just fine. Cost is just fine. If you live in a competitive world, an unpredictable world, then you have to start valuing relationship over predictability. You have to say we need to be connected with each other, not socially, but around the work. We need to be able to confront each other. We need to stop the parent-child model and say we're here to be partners in creating something that has meaning for us. It's larger than just profit, even though growth, profit, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. So let me ask, how are we doing on time?
I think we're about ready for our first table conversation.
That sounds great.
And any wrapping up thoughts, Peter, before we lead them to a breakout?
Yeah, I do have one more thing to say. Simon says, break into small groups.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Peter.